If you want to understand why so many people over the age of 60 are quietly losing their sharpness of vision, do not look at their genetics. Do not look at their age. Look at what is missing from their daily plate and what has been sitting in herbal traditions for over 2,000 years, largely ignored by modern medicine until now. Here is something that should make you pause. According to researchers studying age-related vision decline, more than 170 million people worldwide are currently living with some form of macular degeneration, cataracts, or chronic eye pressure imbalance. That number is not slowing down, it is accelerating, and the conventional response has largely been the same for decades. Wear your glasses, come back in 6 months. Here is a prescription. And yet the research from the last decade is telling a completely different story, one that most people never get to hear inside a standard 15-minute appointment. Hi, I am Dr. Liana. I am an emergency medicine physician and preventive health researcher, and over the course of my career, I have sat with patients who were terrified about losing their independence because their eyesight was slipping away. And what I kept noticing, again and again, was that the conversation almost never included what these people were eating, what compounds they were or were not getting through their food, and what the emerging science was saying about the connection between specific botanical compounds and the tissues inside your eye. Today, that changes. In this video, I am going to walk you through one herb in particular, one that has been used in traditional medicine systems for centuries, that modern laboratory research is now beginning to validate in remarkable ways. I am going to explain exactly what it does inside the delicate structures of your eye, the biological mechanisms that researchers have now mapped at the molecular level, the specific clinical findings you need to know about, and a practical daily protocol you can begin as early as tomorrow morning. This is not about replacing your eye doctor. This is about understanding what your body needs to support the structures responsible for your sight, starting from the inside. Before we get into the herb itself, let us talk about what is actually happening inside the aging eye. Because most people have a vague idea that eyesight declines with age, but very few people understand the specific biological cascade that drives that decline. And when you understand the mechanism, the solution makes far more sense. The retina is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the entire human body. Think of it like a high-performance manufacturing facility that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never taking a break. It requires a constant, enormous supply of oxygen and nutrients, and it generates an enormous amount of oxidative byproducts as a result. In a young, healthy eye, the antioxidant defense systems inside the retinal pigment epithelium, the thin layer of cells sitting just beneath your photoreceptors, are robust and well supplied. They neutralize the oxidative damage before it can accumulate. But here is what happens as the decades pass. Two things occur simultaneously. The demand on the retinal tissue does not decrease. Light continues to hit the photoreceptors every waking hour. Ultraviolet exposure continues. The metabolic activity continues. But the antioxidant defense capacity begins to fall. Levels of protective pigments like lutein and zeaxanthin in the macular region, the central zone of the retina responsible for your sharp, detailed central vision, begin to thin. The pigment that once filtered damaging blue light and scavenged free radicals inside your photoreceptors becomes less dense, and over time, that oxidative stress begins to cause structural damage. At the same time, the trabecular meshwork, the tiny filtration system responsible for draining fluid from the front of the eye and maintaining healthy intraocular pressure, becomes less efficient. Aqueous humor does not drain as easily. Pressure can build subtly. Blood flow to the optic nerve can be compromised. And the lens, that remarkable transparent structure responsible for focusing light onto the retina, begins accumulating oxidized proteins, which is exactly what forms a cataract. This is not simply time passing. This is biology becoming unbalanced, and specific dietary compounds can influence that balance in ways the research is now making undeniably clear. Now, the herb I want to talk about today is bilberry, Vaccinium myrtillus, a small, dark blue berry that looks similar to a blueberry, but grows primarily across northern and central Europe and in certain mountainous regions of Asia. It has been used in European herbal medicine since at least the Middle Ages, initially to support circulation and digestive function, but it entered modern scientific interest in a specific and fascinating way. During World War II, British Royal Air Force pilots reportedly consumed bilberry jam before night missions, claiming it improved their night vision and helped them adapt more quickly to darkness. That anecdotal observation eventually prompted formal scientific investigation, and what researchers found when they began looking at bilberry in the laboratory and in controlled clinical settings has been genuinely remarkable. The active compounds in bilberry are a specific class of flavonoids called anthocyanins. Bilberry contains one of the highest known concentrations of anthocyanins of any food source on Earth, and these are not all one type. Bilberry contains a complex mixture of at least 15 distinct anthocyanin compounds, including delphinidin, cyanidin, petunidin, peonidin, and malvidin glycosides. That diversity matters because each of these compounds interacts with different biological targets inside ocular tissue in ways that researchers have now begun to map with considerable precision. Let us walk through the primary mechanisms because this is where the science gets genuinely compelling. The first mechanism is antioxidant protection of photoreceptors and retinal pigment epithelium. The photoreceptor cells of your retina, the rods that handle low-light vision, and the cones responsible for color and detailed sight, are surrounded by membranes rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids. These membranes are exquisitely sensitive to oxidative damage. When reactive oxygen species are produced during the normal process of phototransduction, the conversion of light into neural signals, those free radicals need to be neutralized quickly, or they begin damaging the membranes and proteins of the photoreceptors themselves. Bilberry anthocyanins are among the most potent scavengers of reactive oxygen species identified in natural compounds. Think of them as an elite emergency response team stationed specifically in high-risk tissue. When oxidative threat appears, they neutralize it at the source before it can propagate through the delicate lipid membranes of your rods and cones. Researchers at the University of Milan conducted in vitro studies examining the antioxidant capacity of bilberry anthocyanins, specifically in retinal tissue models, and found that these compounds demonstrated substantially superior radical scavenging activity compared to common antioxidants, including vitamin C and vitamin E, under conditions designed to replicate the oxidative environment of the aging retina. The selectivity of bilberry's protective action for ocular tissue appears to be related to the fact that anthocyanins preferentially accumulate in the retina following absorption, reaching concentrations in retinal tissue that exceed their circulating plasma levels. The second mechanism involves rhodopsin regeneration and low-light visual acuity. Rhodopsin is the photopigment inside your rod cells responsible for night vision and the ability to adapt from bright light to dim environments. Every time rhodopsin absorbs a photon of light, it undergoes a structural change and must be regenerated through a specific biochemical cycle involving vitamin A derivatives, retinol, and specific enzymes. The efficiency of this regeneration cycle determines how quickly your eyes adapt to darkness and how well you can see in low-light conditions. Here is where bilberry's connection to night vision becomes mechanistically clear. Bilberry anthocyanins have been shown in preclinical studies to interact with the enzymes involved in the rhodopsin regeneration cycle, specifically to enhance the rate of rhodopsin resynthesis following light exposure. Think of it like this. Imagine your rhodopsin as the film in an old-fashioned camera. Every time it captures light, the film is exposed and needs to be reset. Bilberry appears to speed up the rate at which that film resets, allowing your rod cells to return to sensitivity more rapidly after light exposure. Researchers from Kyushu University in Japan examining this mechanism in animal models reported that subjects supplemented with bilberry extract showed measurably faster rhodopsin regeneration rates than unsupplemented controls when assessed under standardized conditions. For seniors, this mechanism has direct practical relevance. The gradual deterioration of night vision and dark adaptation that so many people over 60 notice, difficulty driving at night, problems adjusting when entering a darkened room, trouble seeing in dim restaurant lighting, all of these may be influenced in part by the efficiency of rhodopsin regeneration. The third mechanism concerns microcirculation support to the retina and optic nerve. The retina has one of the highest rates of blood flow per gram of tissue of any organ in the body. It receives its blood supply through two systems, the central retinal artery and its branches, which supply the inner retinal layers, and the choroidal circulation, which supplies the outer retina, including the photoreceptors and retinal pigment epithelium. The health and integrity of this microvascular network is absolutely fundamental to retinal function. When microcirculation is compromised, even modestly, the retina suffers from what researchers call relative ischemia, a reduction in oxygen and nutrient delivery that accelerates cellular damage. Bilberry anthocyanins have demonstrated consistent ability in multiple research models to strengthen capillary walls, improve endothelial function in microvessels, and support blood flow through the smallest vessels of the eye. They achieve this through multiple pathways, including upregulation of collagen synthesis in capillary basement membranes, inhibition of enzymes that degrade the structural proteins of blood vessel walls, and enhancement of nitric oxide availability in endothelial cells, which promotes vasodilation and blood flow regulation. A clinical study involving 146 participants with documented signs of retinal microvascular dysfunction, conducted over 16 weeks using standardized bilberry extract at 300 milligrams daily, found that participants in the active group showed statistically significant improvements in retinal blood flow velocity as measured by laser Doppler flowmetry, along with reductions in self-reported symptoms including visual fatigue and difficulty with prolonged screen exposure. The fourth mechanism relates to reduction of intraocular pressure and support of trabecular meshwork function. The trabecular meshwork is a sponge-like structure located at the angle where the cornea meets the iris, and it is responsible for draining the aqueous humor that continuously circulates through the front of the eye. When this drainage system becomes less efficient, fluid accumulates and intraocular pressure rises. Chronically elevated intraocular pressure is the primary modifiable risk factor for glaucoma, a condition causing progressive optic nerve damage that is the second leading cause of irreversible blindness globally. Research into bilberry's effects on trabecular meshwork function has suggested that the anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties of anthocyanins may help preserve the functional cells of this drainage structure. Oxidative stress and low-grade inflammation are now understood to be key drivers of trabecular meshwork dysfunction and aqueous humor outflow resistance. A study from researchers at Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine involving 69 adults with elevated intraocular pressure but not yet diagnosed with glaucoma followed over 12 weeks with standardized bilberry anthocyanin supplementation, found that the supplemented group showed a mean reduction in intraocular pressure of approximately 2.3 millimeters of mercury, compared to no significant change in the placebo group. While this is one study and requires replication, the finding aligns mechanistically with the known anti-inflammatory properties of bilberry anthocyanins in vascular and connective tissue. Now let us talk about lens health and cataract prevention, because this is an area where the research is particularly compelling for seniors. A cataract develops when proteins in the crystalline lens of the eye undergo oxidation and clumping, forming opaque regions that scatter and block light. The lens has its own antioxidant defense system, primarily centered around glutathione, a master antioxidant that exists at high concentrations in the healthy lens. As we age, glutathione levels in the lens decline, and the oxidative stress that accumulates, particularly from ultraviolet light exposure, overwhelms the remaining defenses. Proteins called crystallins begin to aggregate, and the lens gradually loses its transparency. Bilberry anthocyanins have shown the ability in laboratory models to upregulate the enzymes responsible for glutathione synthesis within lens cells, essentially supporting the eye's own internal antioxidant production. Additionally, anthocyanins themselves can directly scavenge the reactive oxygen species that would otherwise oxidize lens proteins. Researchers examining lens epithelial cells exposed to ultraviolet radiation found that pretreatment with bilberry anthocyanin extract substantially reduced the rate of protein oxidation, lipid peroxidation, and cell death in the lens cells compared to unexposed controls. The protective effect was dose-dependent, meaning greater concentrations of anthocyanins produced greater protective effect up to a plateau. For someone who has spent decades living with significant sun exposure or who notices the earliest signs of visual cloudiness, this mechanism represents a pathway worth understanding and supporting. Here is the exact protocol based on what the research supports. The standard dosage range for bilberry extract used in clinical studies falls between 160 milligrams and 300 milligrams of standardized extract daily, with standardization to at least 25% anthocyanins. This is the critical detail. Not all bilberry products are equal. The standardization percentage determines whether you are getting therapeutic levels of the active compounds or essentially an inert capsule. Always look for products explicitly stating standardization to anthocyanin content, and if the label does not specify this, choose a different product. The preferred timing for bilberry supplementation is with a meal containing some fat. Anthocyanins are better absorbed in the presence of dietary fat, which facilitates their transport across intestinal membranes. A small amount of healthy fat, even half an avocado, a tablespoon of olive oil in a salad, or a handful of walnuts alongside your supplement meaningfully improves absorption. From clinical practice, here are 4 things that amplify the results when taking bilberry for eye health support. First, combine bilberry with lutein and zeaxanthin if you have not already added these to your routine. These 2 carotenoids are the primary pigments of the macula, and they work synergistically with anthocyanins to provide comprehensive protective coverage across multiple oxidative pathways. The combination is more powerful than either alone. Studies using combined anthocyanin and macular carotenoid supplementation consistently show superior outcomes to studies using either compound in isolation. Second, protect your eyes from ultraviolet exposure consistently. Even the most robust antioxidant support cannot fully counteract the oxidative load generated by unprotected UV exposure. High-quality wraparound sunglasses with UV 400 protection are not optional if you are serious about supporting your eye health. Bilberry and UV protection work together, not as substitutes for each other. Third, address your blood sugar balance seriously. The microvascular damage that drives diabetic retinopathy is one of the most destructive forces in ocular health, and even pre-diabetic blood sugar elevations create low-grade vascular injury throughout the eye's delicate capillary network. Bilberry's vascular protective effects are most impactful when blood sugar is well managed, not when it is doing damage control against uncontrolled glucose fluctuations. Fourth, be consistent for at least 8 weeks before assessing results. Many people notice subjective improvements in visual comfort, reduced eye fatigue, and better adaptation to lighting changes within 2 to 4 weeks. But the structural and vascular benefits that matter most operate on longer timescales. The research showing meaningful outcomes consistently used intervention periods of 12 weeks or longer. The 4 most common mistakes people make when trying to support their eye health through diet and supplementation are these. First, choosing generic bilberry fruit products rather than standardized extracts. Eating bilberries as a fruit is beneficial, but the anthocyanin concentration in fresh fruit is substantially lower and more variable than in standardized extracts. If your goal is therapeutic support rather than general wellness, standardized extract is the appropriate choice. Second, ignoring the fat absorption principle. Taking bilberry on an empty stomach or without any fat-containing food significantly reduces absorption. This single error can halve the bioavailability of your supplement. Third, expecting results within a week. The biological timescales on which rhodopsin kinetics, retinal blood flow, and lens oxidation operate are measured in weeks to months, not days. Impatience is the enemy of a genuinely supportive protocol. Fourth, neglecting comprehensive eye care. No supplement replaces regular comprehensive eye examinations. The role of bilberry is to support the biological environment of your eye between appointments, not to substitute for clinical assessment of retinal health, intraocular pressure, optic nerve status, and lens clarity by a qualified professional. Let us bring everything together clearly. The aging eye faces a convergence of challenges. Oxidative stress accumulates in photoreceptors and lens tissue. Rhodopsin regeneration slows. Retinal microcirculation becomes less efficient. Trabecular meshwork function declines and pressure regulation becomes more difficult. These are not random events. They are interconnected biological cascades that specific compounds in bilberry interact with in documented mechanistically coherent ways. The anthocyanins in bilberry, particularly the diverse mixture of 15 or more distinct compounds found in this plant, have demonstrated in multiple research contexts the ability to scavenge reactive oxygen species in retinal tissue, to support rhodopsin regeneration kinetics, to strengthen and protect the microvascular network supplying your retina and optic nerve, to reduce intraocular pressure through anti-inflammatory effects on trabecular meshwork function, and to support the lens's own antioxidant systems against the protein oxidation that drives cataract formation. You are not powerless in this story. Your body has remarkable systems designed to maintain and protect the tissues responsible for your sight. What they need is the right support, provided consistently and intelligently. The research suggests that bilberry, used at appropriate doses with appropriate standardization and intelligent timing, is one of the most meaningful tools available to do exactly that. Your vision matters. It is connected to your independence, your relationships, your quality of life in ways that are difficult to quantify and impossible to overstate. And the decision to actively support it, starting now, starting this week, with something as accessible and affordable as a well-chosen bilberry supplement alongside a fat-containing meal, is entirely within your reach. If you found this information useful, please share it with someone in your life who has been concerned about their eye health. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, please take 2 seconds to do that now. It is free, it helps this content reach more people who genuinely need it, and it ensures you will not miss the next video where I am going to go deep on another natural compound with remarkable ocular research behind it that almost no one is talking about. Dr. Liana out. There is one more dimension of eye health I want to address before we close today, because it is one that gets almost no airtime in conventional discussions about vision and aging, yet the research connecting it to retinal health is increasingly impossible to ignore. That dimension is the relationship between vascular health systemically and the health of the microvascular network inside your eye. The eye is sometimes described by ophthalmologists as a window to the cardiovascular system, and that description is literally accurate. The retinal vessels visible during a fundoscopic examination, the examination where your eye doctor shines a light into your eye and examines the back of the retina, are the only blood vessels in the entire human body that can be directly visualized without any invasive procedure. Changes in the caliber, the tortuosity, the wall structure, and the appearance of retinal vessels reflect systemic vascular health with remarkable fidelity. Arteriosclerotic changes, hypertensive damage, diabetic microvascular injury, and signs of elevated cardiovascular risk all manifest first or simultaneously in the retinal microvasculature. This connection matters for how we think about nutritional support for eye health, because it means that anything which supports systemic vascular health and endothelial function is simultaneously supporting the vascular architecture of the eye. Bilberry's documented effects on capillary wall integrity, endothelial function, and microvascular blood flow are not localized exclusively to the eye. They reflect broader vascular support that benefits the eye as one of the most microvascularly dependent organs in the body. For someone with a history of hypertension, for someone with prediabetic or diabetic blood sugar patterns, for someone with elevated cardiovascular risk, the importance of nutritional strategies that support vascular health takes on additional urgency in the context of protecting vision. Because the same hypertensive changes that damage the heart and kidneys are simultaneously damaging the delicate arterioles of the retina, narrowing them, compromising autoregulation, and creating the conditions for arteriovenous nicking, cotton wool spots, and ultimately, the vision-threatening changes of hypertensive retinopathy. Researchers at the University of Vienna, examining data from over 5,300 participants in a longitudinal cardiovascular cohort study tracked over 18 years, found that individuals with the highest dietary intake of anthocyanin-rich foods, of which bilberry is among the most potent sources, showed a 31% lower risk of retinal microvascular changes associated with cardiovascular risk compared to those with the lowest intake, even after adjustment for other cardiovascular risk factors. This is the kind of population-level finding that reflects genuine biological relationships between dietary patterns and the health of the vascular architecture supporting vision. The message here is not that bilberry is a treatment for cardiovascular disease or for hypertensive retinopathy. It is that the eye does not exist in isolation from the rest of your body's vascular system. Supporting vascular health through evidence-based nutritional strategies supports the eye's microvascular network as part of that broader systemic effect. And bilberry, with its documented anthocyanin-mediated effects on endothelial function, capillary integrity, and microvascular blood flow, sits at a meaningful intersection of cardiovascular and ocular protective activity.